Hey guys. This is part 3 of What If Hinata Had Neji's Personality. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 14. A Fortunate Sprain. Hinata gritted her teeth as she suppressed the searing pain in her ankle. She and her teammates had been sent on an endurance run by Kakashi, and the weather was abysmal. It had been raining on and off for the past 45 minutes, and the sky was a depressing gray color. Unfortunately for the Hyuga heiress, several puddles had formed due to the rain. One of these puddles also happened to be a small pothole, which she had tripped over. Hinata's ankle had twisted as she had fallen, likely spraining it in the process. Despite the obvious injury, she had decided to continue running. For every step she took, her ankle became more and more unbearable to put weight on. 2 more laps. Just 2 more. Ignore the pain, Hinata thought to herself. After several more steps, her mental coaching could not motivate her enough to continue running. She crashed to the ground and grimaced in pain as she clutched her injured ankle. Good God, why does this have to be so painful? She hissed. She rolled onto her back and sighed as it began to rain again. For roughly 10 minutes, she laid there silently. Eventually, she was found by the first and last person that she would have wanted to find her injured on the street. Hinata? Are you trying to nap in the middle of the street? Naruto, who had made his way around the village, said. Hinata glanced at the blonde and attempted to sit up. Before she could fully straighten, her ankle shifted, causing her to yelp. I think I might have sprained my ankle, she admitted. Naruto jogged over to Hinata and knelt down beside her. Oh, that's not good. How many laps do you have left? He asked. The Hyuga girl thought for a moment. 3. I think I sprained it during my 4th lap, she replied through a grimace. The Jinchuriki raised an eyebrow. You ran an entire lap around the village with a sprained ankle? I've gotta say, that's really impressive, he complimented. The Hyuga heiress sighed. Be that as it may, I can't walk on it anymore, she said frustratedly. Naruto remained silent for a moment before plucking her from the ground and walking back towards the bench where Kakashi was always situated during their endurance runs. What on earth are you doing? Hinata squeaked, her face practically glowing red. The Jinchuriki shrugged and adjusted his grip on her to better support her weight. Carrying you back to Kakashi-sensei. He probably knows how to fix a sprained ankle. It'll probably take 15 minutes to get back, so be patient, he replied. The Hyuga girl shifted a bit in his arms. You could have at least asked before picking me up, she grumbled. Naruto gave her a bored look and shook his head. If I had asked, you would have scurried away or punched me. Maybe both, he said bluntly. Hinata opened her mouth to refute the statement, but shut it again when she found that he was likely correct. I would have been perfectly justified if I had punched you, Naruto-san, she said quietly, managing to catch herself before attaching kun to the end of Naruto's name. The blonde chuckled at her retort. Then why haven't you? I'm in range, and I probably can't dodge you, he asked. Hinata responded by wrapping her arms around the back of his neck and curling up. I don't want you to drop me. It would hurt, she admitted, clearly embarrassed by the fact that she was being carried bridal style through the streets of Konoha. Naruto reddened a bit at the heightened physical contact, but continued to carry her. I won't drop you. If I did, you'd tear me in half once you could walk again if I did. I don't want to die as a teenager, he said. The Hyuga heiress remained silent as she was briskly transported through the village, her face a shade of red that had yet to be discovered by the scientific community. After several minutes, she spoke again. Thank you for this. Really, she said gratefully. The Jinchuriki smiled and adjusted his grip on her again. You don't have to thank me. What was I supposed to do? Just leave you in the rain with a sprained ankle? He replied. His teammate looked up at him and tilted her head to one side. Well, you could have just ran to Kakashi-sensei and brought him here yourself. Instead, you chose to slow yourself down and carry me, she pointed out. Would you have preferred me to have done that instead of carrying you? He asked. Hinata, to his surprise, shook her head and tightened her grip around his neck and shoulder. No. I would have caught a cold. You're quite pleasantly warm, she said quietly. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Thank you? He said, earning a rare giggle from the Hyuga heiress. The blonde sighed and looked down at his injured teammate once more. What's so funny? He asked. Hinata shook her head and calmed herself down in order to speak. Oh, nothing. I just find the fact that you were perfectly willing to pick up me, your female teammate, but are unsure of how to react the half of a compliment to be quite endearing, she said humorously. Naruto studied her for several seconds. You should laugh more. It suits you, he said. Hinata immediately averted eye contact and curled up again. And you should carry me more often. It suits us both, she said quietly. The moment the sentence left her lips, she realized her critical mistake and slapped a hand over her mouth. Naruto raised an eyebrow. What was that? He asked. The hyuga heiress shook her head rapidly and covered her pink-tinted face. Nothing. Nothing at all, she said meekly. The blonde shrugged and picked up the pace at which he was walking. After another minute or two of walking, they reached the bench where their sensei awaited them. What do we have here? Bridal style, huh? Not bad, Naruto. Kakashi, who was still reading his orange-colored book, asked. Naruto set Hinata down on the bench next to the jonin. She sprained her ankle. She tripped, or something, he explained. Kakashi knelt down and studied the hyuga girl's foot for a moment before nodding in confirmation. Not a sprain, but a dislocation. Definitely painful looking. I can fix this pretty easily, he said. Hinata sighed in relief and allowed the silver-haired ninja to prop her foot up on the bench. Then, without warning, Kakashi snapped her ankle back into its socket, eliciting a high-pitched cry of pain from Hinata. Couldn't you have warned me first? She demanded as she tentatively rotated her foot around. The jonin shrugged and returned his attention to his book. If I had, you would have tensed up and made it even more painful. Now get running, you two. Try not to hurt yourself again, Hinata, he ordered. The genin both sighed, but nodded and took off running to complete their final laps. 3 for Hinata, and 2 for Naruto. Kakashi watched them as they scurried away and smiled. They're a weird pair, but I'd be lying if I said they weren't adorable. Naruto wiped sweat from his brow as he reset into his stance and stared down Kakashi. They had been sparring in the rain for the past 30 minutes, a true test of the Jinchuriki's endurance in combat. Despite the difference in strength between the two, Kakashi had not refrained from hitting the genin hard and cleanly, as evidenced by the blood trickling down the side of Naruto's face. Don't just stare at me, kid. Do something, the jonin ordered. Naruto responded by charging forward and throwing a punch at the left side of Kakashi's head, a strike that the silver-haired ninja easily evaded. The blonde followed up the missed punch with a kick to Kakashi's chest which, to his surprise, landed and launched the jonin backwards. Good. Now build on that success, the older ninja said. Naruto nodded and pressed forward again. Before he could mount any sort of offense, his head was snapped back by a sharp, left-handed punch from Kakashi. The Jinchuriki stumbled back a step and growled. He then returned fire with 2 punches that both missed, earning him a hard knee to the stomach from his sensei. Naruto coughed painfully and dropped to his knees, a small stream of blood trickling from his mouth. What the hell is this? Why are you beating the hell out of me? This isn't even training at this point, he demanded from his knees. Kakashi gave him a hard stare. Because you need to get stronger quickly. The exams are 2 weeks out, and you're our best bet for the one-on-one combat section of the testing. I can't afford to take it easy on you, he explained. The blonde frowned and climbed to his feet. That doesn't make sense to me. Hinata is still the strongest member of our team, he said. The jonin shook his head. No, she isn't. You know as well as I do that you could kill her if you fought. The clones, stamina, and demonic chakra would be far too much for Hinata to handle, he said. I've already told you, Kakashi-sensei. I can't control the fox's power, he said. The jonin raised an eyebrow. I have some doubts about that. Hinata told me that you were awfully calm for somebody who claimed to have no control over the power he was using, he said. Naruto sighed. Look, I'm not lying when I say I can't just call on it whenever I want. I just know what state of mind I need to be in for the power to have a chance of manifesting. When I'm pissed, there's always a chance that the power comes out, he explained. Kakashi nodded and stepped back. We're done sparring for today. I have something I've been meaning to teach you for a few days now, he said. Before Naruto could ask the obvious question of what he would be learning, the jonin held out a hand and focused a mass of chakra into it. After several moments, a swirling sphere of blue energy formed in the palm of his hand. What's that? I can hear it, the Jinchuriki asked curiously. Kakashi smiled and forced a bit more chakra into the sphere, increasing its size slightly. It's called Rasengan. A technique invented by the 4th Hokage, who also happened to be my sensei when I was your age, he explained. Naruto's eyes widened. You were trained by the 4th? That's awesome, he said. The silver-haired ninja nodded and allowed the sphere to fizzle out. You're going to be learning this technique, and you aren't likely to learn a stronger one for quite some time. But even more so than many powerful jutsu, the Rasengan is incredibly difficult to use. It's the height of shape transformation, and you're going to hate it by the time you're practiced enough to use it in combat, he said. The genin nodded. Alright, what do I have to do to learn it? He asked. Kakashi reached into his kunai pouch and produced 3 unfilled water balloons. Fill these up with rainwater, and we can get started. Shikamaru yawned as he walked through the streets of Konoha. He was out late, later than he likely should have been, but sleep had eluded him consistently throughout the night. Clan drilling had been simplistic and boring that day, with the lazy genin being forced to spar his father numerous times. He had lost each and every time, obviously, but the sessions had not even been stressful. Being a ninja is boring as hell. Even the Land of Waves mission didn't get interesting until Naruto died, he thought to himself. He then rounded a corner and turned onto a new street. As he walked along, his mind wandered back to something his father, Shikaku, had said during one of their sparring sessions. If you can't defend yourself when faced with an opponent that you can't just outthink, you'll die before you've had your first legal sip of alcohol. Shikamaru sighed as he contemplated the frustrating accuracy that the Nara clan head's words held. The lazy genin had never been a good student of taijutsu, and it was beginning to show in training. Naruto, who had essentially never been trained formally, tended to beat him more often than not, and Hinata obviously trounced him. I should get Kakashi-sensei to help me sometime. I'll get my ass handed to me in the exam if I can at least punch with people, he thought to himself. While he had been thinking, Shikamaru had stopped paying attention to where he was walking, and promptly bumped into somebody as a result. Sorry about that. I spaced out a little, he apologized as he offered a hand to the person he had accidentally knocked to the ground. The person in question was a boy around his same age. He had long brown hair and pale, blank eyes. The boy took the hand and stood to his feet. Don't worry about it. We both failed to pay attention, and as such, we collided, he said as he dusted himself off. The shadow user looked him up and down and raised an eyebrow. A hyuga, huh? I guess they all talk like 17th century poets, he thought to himself. The hyuga boy studied him for a moment before speaking again. Would you happen to be Shikamaru Nara? He asked, surprising the lazy genin. Shikamaru nodded and raised an eyebrow. I am, yes. How do you know who I am exactly? He asked skeptically. His fellow genin chuckled and gestured to the village around them. Kakashi Hataki's Team 7 has gained quite a name in this village, Nara-san. You completed an A-ranked mission with only D-ranked missions under your belt. A feat like that is completely unheard of. Aside from your 15 minutes of fame, my cousin also happens to be a member of your team, he explained. The Nara chuckled. Hinata, right? She's an interesting one, that's for sure. Not necessarily in a good way either, he replied, well aware that he was walking a fine line by backhandedly insulting the hyuga girl. The boy laughed out loud. I would have to agree with you on that front. Cold as an icicle. Just as sharp too. I must say, most people don't have the gusto to insult a member of the Hyuga clan to the face of another member. You impress me, Nara-san, he complimented. Shikamaru grinned. I'm a no-nonsense kind of guy. I don't like to sugarcoat things, he said. The Hyuga boy chuckled and nodded. Neither do I. Now, as fascinating as this conversation has been, I must be going now. I have places to be, he said, turning to walk away as he spoke. The shadow user watched him walk for several moments before calling out to him. What's your name? He asked. The boy glanced back over his shoulder and stopped walking for a moment. My name is Neji, he replied before continuing his trek towards his destination, whatever it was. Shikamaru then turned and began to walk back towards his home. So, that's the guy Kakashi-sensei is worried about, huh? Can't say I don't understand his concern. He seemed competent. More than most genin are, he thought to himself. The shadow user reached the front door of his home at roughly 1 in the morning. He sighed and pushed the door open. I should stop going for late-night walks. I always run into someone scary. Chapter 15, Bitter and Envious. Hinata shivered slightly as she silently observed 2 distant figures from behind a tree. It was nearly midnight, but she had completed her drilling several hours previously, meaning that she had the freedom to do as she pleased until the next day. Her curfew had been informally removed after Hayashi had discovered the reasoning behind her tardiness, something the Hyuga girl was extremely grateful for. The 2 people she was using her new freedom to observe were Naruto and Kakashi, who were sparring in the training field, as they always seemed to be at this hour. Under most circumstances, such a sparring session would be completely uninteresting to the Hyuga heiress, as Naruto's technique was still fairly sloppy, but this occasion was different. For all of the problems with how he goes about it, Naruto-kun's taijutsu is evolving. Quickly, at that she thought to herself as she observed the blonde engage with their teacher again and again. The finer details of his taijutsu were still rough and crude, but the application of his techniques was much better than it had been before. On top of that, he was actually making attempts at defensive maneuvers, failing many of them, but attempting all the same, which was an enormous improvement from how he had been. As she continued to observe the match, the more small details she noticed to be improved about his close-range combat. From small nuances of footwork to punching form, everything had sharpened. None of it was anywhere near perfect, but now, he appeared to be competent, which could not have been said about him even a week previously. That time frame in which his improvement had to have taken place was what was beginning to bother the Hyuga girl as she watched him almost compete with Kakashi, who was clearly holding back, but was also not reading his orange-covered book. A week ago, I could have made a night out of silently critiquing his footwork alone, but now, I feel as though I myself may struggle with him a bit. How on earth has he improved so drastically, she wondered to herself, a trace of indignation permeating the thought. She took a deep breath to calm herself down as she begrudgingly found herself becoming more and more impressed as Naruto and Kakashi exchanged leads and counters. The blonde had not won a single exchange, but he had not been blown out of the water either. The longer she watched, the greater the bruise on Hinata's ego became. For an untrained until recently boy to have improved more in a week than she had in the past 5 years was a difficult pill to swallow, and it was still stuck in her throat, as she was internally seething. I shouldn't be angry. I have no right to be angry. But this makes me angry, she scolded herself frustratedly. As she was having this internal crisis, somebody else joined her in watching the blonde train. You look perturbed, Shikamaru, who had silently made his way behind Hinata, said tiredly. The Hyuga heiress glanced over her shoulder and sighed heavily. What gives you that impression? She asked. The shadow user chuckled and walked up to her left, keeping his eyes glued to the distant drilling session. You're shaking a little? That either means you're pissed or crying, and you don't seem like the crying type to me. Not at all, actually, he said. Hinata turned her attention back to Naruto. Excellent deductive reasoning, Nara-san. Would you like a medal? She asked sarcastically. Shikamaru laughed out loud. You suck at hiding your emotions. Insulting me is just further confirmation, he said. The Hyuga heiress growled slightly, but took a deep breath and calmed herself down. What do you want? She asked a bit more quietly. The lazy genin studied her momentarily before asking the obvious question. Why are you angry? You're watching Naruto, the only person outside of your family that you seem to give a damn about, on a good day at least train. That seems like it would be a good time for you, he asked curiously. Hinata pursed her lips and exhaled through her nose as Naruto and Kakashi began to work on a jutsu of some kind. It isn't something you would understand with your lack of motivation, she replied stubbornly. Shikamaru sighed and gave her a bored look. Quite being difficult, and tell me. I'm not stupid, I can empathize enough to understand whatever your reasoning is, he said. The Hyuga girl remained silent for a moment before caving and revealing her dilemma. His progress in taijutsu is absolutely astounding. A week ago, he was bordering on incompetence, and now he's actually a perfectly respectable striker. He moves, he pivots, he counters, the works. 1 week, Nara-san. 1 week of work with Kakashi-sensei, and this is the result, she said through clenched teeth. The shadow user raised an eyebrow. That's a good thing, Hinata. Why the hell would his progress bother you? He asked, well aware of the answer he was bound to receive. Hinata threw up her hands and turned to face him fully. It isn't the progress itself that bothers me. It's the time frame. He has never been formally trained until now, and he's seen more growth in 7 days than I have in the past half-decade. Can you not see why this angers me? She asked somewhat loudly. Shikamaru frowned. So, his progress makes you angry because you aren't progressing at the same rate? He asked. The Hyuga heiress opened her mouth to deny the question, but shut it again when she realized he was likely correct. Yes, that's exactly what it is. He makes me feel inadequate, she admitted quietly. Shikamaru shook his head and rubbed his temples. It isn't exactly the same thing, but I'm assuming that you've heard of the term beginner's luck? He's never been given proper training, so he's reaping the benefits of actually learning the proper basics for the first time. Of course he's improving quickly, he said. Hinata grumbled a bit. Be that as it may, I deserve the improvement more. I break my back day in and day out for this, and he can't say the same. He works hard, but not in the same way, she said sulkily. In a rare moment of anger, Shikamaru's hand shot forward and seized the front of her shirt, pulling her forward several feet until their faces were inches apart. Oh, that's just rich. You want to talk about working hard? Just read between the lines. You see him every single morning at our group sessions, And you watch him train at night from the looks of things. Do you think he just sits around all day? He trains 19 hours per day. He breaks his back for this even more than you do, princess, he hissed angrily. He then released her and pushed her back. Hinata regained her balance quickly and glared at him. I've never liked you much, Hinata, but I figured you were above petty jealousy. Fix that problem if you want either my or Naruto's respect. You've almost got Naruto's, but you might lose it if you keep thinking the way you do, he said as he turned to walk away. Before he could fully exit the training field, he glanced back over his shoulder once more. Look, I care about the guy, and I think you do too. I watch him progress and I feel a sense of second-hand pride. You should experience the same feeling while watching him, he said as he faded into the distant night. Hinata watched him for several moments before wheeling around and returning to her previous viewing position. Even if you're right, Nara-san, I'll still use the exams to show you both why the future of the village's largest clan falls to me, and not you. Naruto stretched as he walked through the streets of Konoha. It was roughly noon, and Kakashi had decided to grant him an unusual day off for unknown reasons. The Chunin exams were now 8 days away, and the blonde had made substantial progress in most areas of combat, save for Genjutsu, which he was completely hopeless at. Genjutsu is stupid. It doesn't make any sense. I won't really be needing it anyways, so it doesn't really matter in the end, he thought to himself as he walked along. After a few minutes of travel, he came across a fascinating sight. Is that Kunoichi? Naruto wondered as he watched the Hokage's grandson be dragged along by a girl around the same age as him. She had long brown hair, a hard facial expression, and pale, lavender-colored eyes. The Jinchuriki immediately recognized the girl from the Hyuga estate, where he had seen her twice. A Hyuga is torturing you too, Kunoichi? I guess it's in their blood, he thought to himself humorously. He then jogged his way over to the academy students, gaining their attention with his rapid approach. Boss! You've got to help me. She's insane. Kunoichi, who was still being pulled towards an unknown destination by the Hyuga girl. The girl glared at him and yanked harder on the arm she was latched onto. Silence, Kunoichi-san. You said that you would have lunch with me, and I will not allow you to go back on your word, she said sternly as she dragged him. Kunoichi shook his head and struggled harder. I told you I was hungry. I never said anything about eating with you, he corrected frantically. Naruto struggled to suppress his laughter as he watched the children bicker. Man, I know how you feel. You may as well give up, kid. Hyuga women are more than a little stubborn, he suggested. The remark earned him a glare from the girl. Don't generalize, Uzumaki-san. Yours and Kunoichi-san's experiences with myself and my sister are outliers, not the mean. Besides, I am far more aggressive and socially confident than Hinata-nezen has ever been, she snapped. The Jinchuriki frowned. Wait, you're Hinata's sister? He asked skeptically. The girl quit pulling on Kunoichi and nodded. Yes, my name is Hanabi Hyuga. Before you ask, I know who you are through my sister, whom you have greatly affected in recent weeks, she replied. Naruto raised an eyebrow. You make it sound like she talks about me, he said. Hanabi giggled and seized Kunoichi, who had silently been trying to slip away amidst the exchange of words, by the back of his collar. Oh yes, she had mentioned you by name several times. She speaks quite favorably of you, in case you were wondering, she said. The Jinchuriki chuckled. That's a surprise. I think she's mad at me right now. Not sure why, but she was glaring at me a lot during our morning exercises, he said. Hanabi sighed and locked Kunoichi in a full Nelson to prevent any more movement from him. Do not worry. Hyuga has little to do with you as a person, she said vaguely, earning a questioning look from the blonde. Could you stop trying to bend me into a pretzel, Hanabi? It hurts. Kunoichi whined as he was held in place by the Hyuga girl. Then quit running away. Do that, and I will gently lead you along towards our destination, Hanabi said. The Hokage's grandson grumbled to himself a bit before nodding and relaxing, prompting the Hyuga girl to release him from the painful grip and settle beside him. What do you mean her being mad at me has nothing to do with me as a person? Naruto asked skeptically. Hanabi shrugged and began to pull Kunoichi along once more. Ask her yourself. Although, I doubt you'll get a straight answer. She can be difficult that way, she called over her shoulder before rounding a corner with her begrudging companion in tow. The Jinchuriki stared in the direction they had walked for several moments before chuckling and turning to walk to Ichiraku's. No thank you. I don't have a death wish. Kakashi Hatake was, generally speaking, a man of excellent manners. He kept his elbows off the table, he cleaned his plate properly, he held the door for women when the opportunity arose, and he used proper honorifics when the situation called for them. Today, however, he was far too tired to bother with something as trivial as etiquette. This lack of social energy was demonstrated quite clearly when he simply walked into Hiruzen's office, completely uninvited, without knocking. The sight within was unexpected, to say the least, as the Hokage's nose was buried in an identical, orange-covered book to the one Kakashi read daily. The two men stared at each other for several moments before they came to a silent agreement to forget that either one of them had seen or heard of such literature. "What brings you here, Kakashi?" the Hokage asked politely. The Jonin sighed and sat himself down in a chair across from the old man at his desk. "I have an unusual request regarding the Chunin exams," he said, earning a look of interest from the ancient Kage. "Oh? And what kind of request is it?" "I'm in a pleasant mood, so I may be able to grant it if it isn't too ludicrous," he asked curiously. Kakashi gathered his words for a moment before speaking. "Should my team make it through the forest of death, which both you and I expect them to do fairly easily, would it be at all possible for you to set a match in stone for the preliminary matches?" he asked. Hiruzen stroked his bearded chin and narrowed his eyes. "Before I confirm or deny this request, tell me what match you would like to ensure, and why," he ordered firmly. Kakashi remained silent for several moments before following the order. "I want you to ensure that Naruto and Hinata fight during the exams," he said. The Hokage nodded and motioned for him to continue. "As for why, I think it should be fairly obvious to you, Hokage-sama. They have differences to sort out," he said. Hiruzen frowned. "Do they?" "From my vantage point, Hinata seems to be warming up to him considerably compared to where they were less than a month ago." "Are you sure you want them fighting?" he asked skeptically. The silver-haired ninja nodded. "From Hinata's perspective, at least, problems need to be solved, and there's no other way to solve them than to let them hash it out in combat," he said. Hiruzen frowned once more. "What have you seen to give you this idea?" he asked. Kakashi sighed. "Where to begin?" Chapter 16. A chilling premonition. "Fight back, damn it! Don't just gawk at me. Give me what I want. Is it that hard to understand, you pathetic simpleton?" a horned girl screamed, her teeth bared to reveal a set of fangs. Naruto, whose eyes were crimson with slitted pupils, clenched his jaw and ducked down to avoid a kick aimed for the side of his head. The blonde then planted his feet and returned fire with a hard punch to the left side of her jaw that sent the girl tumbling backwards. "That's better. Now keep that up." "We aren't finished yet," the girl hissed as she rubbed her bruised jawline. The blonde looked on in a confused haze as he was attacked again and again by the girl, who he couldn't quite identify. Her movements bore similarities to something Naruto had seen before, but they were much more feral and aggressive. As he retreated away from her, her features became more and more clear. The more visible the specific details of her face and figure became more recognizable, the greater the confusion ravaging the Jinchuriki. Despite the obvious answer being presented to him as to her identity, it took another 2 minutes of frantic combat for Naruto to catch sight of something that forcibly confirmed his fears. In the center of the black scara encompassing her eyes was a pair of pale lavender irises. The Jinchuriki's eyes widened and his body tensed, allowing his opponent to land flush with a palm strike to his chest. Naruto coughed up blood and dropped to his knees. Hinata. He sputtered as he struggled to breath properly. The demonic hyuga scowled for a moment, but allowed a dark, sanguinary grin to spread across her black lips. She knelt down in front of Naruto and rested her forehead on his, the tips of her small horns digging into his skin under the weight of her skull. "Something wrong, Naruto-kun? Do you feel like giving up? If so, you're out of luck. I'm not done with you yet. Not nearly. We're going to have such fun together here, where nobody can hear you scream," she whispered in a smooth, almost hypnotic tone. Before Naruto could respond, his throat was seized by his teammate. Naruto's eyes snapped open as he sat up straight in bed. His breathing was ragged, and his body was soaked within a cold sweat. It had all been an awful nightmare. The Jinchuriki flopped back onto his side and rubbed the side of his head. "That was a new one. Where the hell did that come from? Most of my dreams are about things that have actually happened." "That definitely hasn't happened," he thought to himself as he repaired his badly compromised composure. He then sat back up again and sighed. "And I have to see her face in," he thought, glancing to the left at his alarm clock as the thought formed completely. 4 hours. Great, just great. At least she doesn't actually have horns. Not that they wouldn't be fitting right now. She's been so edgy lately, the genin thought to himself as an image of his far-from-demonic teammate flashed into his mind. "What's your problem, Hinata? One day, you're being about as close to friendly as you're capable of being, and the next you act like you'd rather eat dirt than be around me. You're so frustrating, he thought to himself. He then performed a mental comparison between the horned girl in his nightmare and the hyuga heiress, sighing as he came to the same conclusion for both versions. You were still kind of hot as a demoness, which is really saying something. Honestly, you'd be really desirable if you were consistently likable. Too bad you're about as reliably warm as a blizzard, he thought to himself somewhat humorously. The blonde then hopped off of his bed and stretched as he sensed that sleep would not come easily that night. He threw on a jacket and strapped on his sandals before making his way to his front door. Before he opened it, he checked his pockets and sighed when he realized they were empty. He quickly jogged to his dining table and grabbed a kunai from its surface. He tucked the blade in his pocket and exited his apartment. He jogged down the stairs and leapt down to the ground, skipping the final 4 on his way down. For somebody who should be asleep, you're quite energetic. Naruto froze and glanced over his shoulder. Leaning against the side of his apartment building was a very tired, but still quite amused-looking Hayashi Hyuga. The blonde stared at the man for several moments before asking the most obvious of questions given the situation. What are you doing outside my apartment? Don't you have clan head things to be doing? If we're both being honest with ourselves, you need the sleep more than I do, he asked skeptically. The Hyuga clan head sighed and stepped out into the light of the street lantern that illuminated the street. Under any other circumstances at any other time, I wouldn't be caught dead outside of your dwelling. Not because I strongly dislike you, but because of the image I must maintain. You understand all too well, I know, he replied tiredly. The Jinchuriki chuckled. What are the circumstances that make tonight an exception? I'm honestly dying to know, he asked curiously. Hayashi smiled tiredly. Do you really want to know the answer? Because it will both shock you and make you very uncomfortable, he replied. Naruto raised an eyebrow and motioned for the Hyuga man to continue. The clan head rubbed sleep from his eyes and stood up straighter. Hinata sent me out to watch you until at least 1 in the morning. She had studies to attend to, so she simply did not have the time tonight to do it herself. I, for the first time in 6 months, had a night of free time. So, taking advantage of the fact that I had not yet drank the herbal tea that allows me to sleep at night, she demanded that I do it instead, he explained. The Jinchuriki frowned. And you listened to her because, why? He asked skeptically, clearly confused by the series of events that had just been explained to him. Hayashi shrugged. If I am to be honest, I have no idea. Maybe it's because I expected this to be much more interesting than it has been. I don't know how Hinata manages to entertain herself 3 nights out of the week, but her methods have eluded me, he replied. The Jinchuriki studied the response carefully, becoming more and more concerned as he took it apart. I have several questions, he said. Hayashi grinned and motioned for the excitable genin to continue speaking. First of all, you're making it sound like she comes out here and watches me sleep 3 times per week. Does she do that? And if she does, why? He asked. The Hyuga clan head nodded. She does. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays she leaves her bedroom 9 o'clock sharp to silently intercept you on your walk home. From there, she trails you until you enter your apartment. Then, she waits outside the building and watches you with her Byakugan until either midnight or 1 o'clock. As for why she does it, it's her very, very unconventional way of showing you that she cares, he explained. Naruto frowned. If you hadn't come out here and told me that, I would have had no idea. If she wants to show me she cares, why doesn't she just be nice to me on a regular basis? That would be a much better way to do it than stalking me, he asked. Hayashi sighed. Hinata is not, and never will be good at expressing positive emotions coherently. She chose this method because she has absolutely no clue how to actually be your friend, or more than that if she ever wishes to be. Even her sister, Hanabi, is substantially better at such things, and her only friend is terrified of her due to her incredibly aggressive approach to attempted courtship, he said. Naruto stifled a laugh as he recalled the scene he had witnessed between his young friend and the aggressive Hyuga. That all makes sense, I guess. My one problem with it is that she's been even more volatile than usual lately. She refuses to talk to anybody, especially me. Any idea what her problem is? He asked. The elder Hyuga shook his head. Don't worry about it. It has little to do with you, for the most part. She is merely frustrated with herself, and she is using you as a scapegoat. It will come to pass in due time, he said. Naruto nodded and yawned. I will be leaving now. Sleep well, Uzumaki-san. The Chunin exams begin in 4 days' time, and I fully expect you to perform excellently, Hayashi said as he turned and walked away. The blonde watched the clan head disappear into the night and sighed. No matter how nice he is to me, I can never shake the feeling that I'm being tested every time we talk. Hinata growled as she picked herself up from the blood-stained mats of the Hyuga Estate's dojo. Across the mat stood the culprit who had knocked her to the ground, Neji Hyuga. Despite their placements in different cells, they had been ordered to spar one another regularly in preparation for the upcoming exams. Rise quickly, Hinata-sama. We still have much to do today, Neji ordered from across the room. The Hyuga girl spit blood out of her mouth and reassumed her stance, prompting her cousin to take a step forward and extend a hand, a silent invitation to attack. She obliged and leapt forward with a flurry of palm strikes, all of which were either blocked or parried by Neji. As she took a step to recreate space, Hinata was kicked cleanly on the right side of the base of her neck, deadening her nervous system momentarily and sending her crashing to the mat again. Calm down. You're being far too openly aggressive. This isn't like you, Hinata-sama, the Hyuga boy said as his cousin struggled to her feet once more. Then let me work this aggression out of my system, Hinata said as she steadied herself. Before Neji could respond, he was forced to pivot around another blitz from the heiress. The Hyuga girl quickly rebounded from her missed strike and pursued the boy across the mats once more, running face first into a stiff punch from her cousin. As I said, you're being sloppy? I will simply continue to counter you if you don't calm down. Getting hit will only anger you further, so try not to run yourself into my strikes, Neji said, as he leaned his head back to avoid a high kick from Hinata. As her foot sailed past his face, the heiress pushed off of her planted leg, landing several feet away from Neji. She took several deep breaths and slowly dropped into a less rigid stance. Her cousin nodded in approval and charged forward to engage her. The pair then began to exchange leads and counters in a rhythmic dance of taijutsu. Would you mind telling me what has you so perturbed, Hinata-sama? Neji asked as her countered a left-handed palm strike from his cousin with a hard elbow to her forehead. Upon recovering from the counter and returning fire, Hinata shook her head. It's none of your concern, Neji-san. My personal trials and tribulations are exactly that. Personal, she replied as she planted a hard palm strike in Neji's stomach. The Hyuga boy doubled over momentarily, but quickly snapped to attention and kicked out one of Hinata's legs, forcing her to take a knee momentarily. Is that so? If you won't tell me yourself, would you mind if I took a guess as to what has you so very irritated? He asked as the heiress climbed to her feet. Hinata raised an eyebrow and re-entered the fray with a palm strike that was blocked. Go right ahead. Even if you guess correctly, you have nothing to gain from the information, she pointed out as she was grazed by a cutting strike to the right side of her face. In that case, I'll put my intuition to the test. Would the emotion at the center of your ever-present whirlwind of negativity happen to be jealousy of some kind? He asked, earning a high kick that he was barely able to block from his cousin. Not jealousy, Neji-san, but indignation. Indignation at the cruel and unfair reality that was forcibly demonstrated to me several nights ago. Something you should understand quite well, she replied. Neji chuckled and snapped her head back with a sharp punch. Why must you always try to drag others down into your own pitfalls? You have a team of good people behind you, and yet you still cling to your petty arrogance. They deserve better, you know, he said. The heiress snorted and wiped blood from her nose before stepping into range and striking him twice on either side of his ribs with her palms, eliciting a grunt of pain from her cousin. Is it arrogance when it's rooted in a system that has been in place for generations? If a system has stood the test of time, then that means it is working. Why would I give my respect to those beneath me? She snapped. Neji shook his head and tripped her again, this time in such a way that her head would collide with his knee as she dropped to the ground. You've already shown one member of your team more respect than you've ever shown me. You readily admitted upon your return from the land of waves that you wept for Naruto Uzumaki, as he lay dying in your arms after paying the ultimate price for you. Beyond that, you also elegantly stalk him from the shadows for the sake of your own worries. You may not want to admit it, but you respect him, and possibly only him, greatly. In fact, based on the state of the kitchen the past few mornings, you feel some degree of attachment to him, he said. Hinata sighed and stood up to her feet, rubbing the side of her head that had fallen onto her cousin's knee. Why must everybody in this family be so gluttonous? She muttered in reference to Neji's comment about the kitchen. She then turned her attention back to Neji. Maybe I have developed some level of respect for Naruto-san, but he is still not my equal. Should he prove to be such a thing, then I will make arrangements, she said before stepping into her stance once more. Her cousin silently chuckled. If you're anything like myself, you will strongly dislike the feeling of being matched by a clanless shinobi. Chapter 17. Looming Threat. Naruto groaned tiredly as he peeled himself from his couch and walked towards his front door, which was being knocked on. It was 9:30 at night, and the blonde had fallen asleep on his couch roughly 3 hours previously. His nightly session with Kakashi had been cancelled due to another set of unknown reasons. Coming. Give me 10 seconds, would you? Naruto called as he tiredly walked to his door. Upon reaching it, he threw it open and sighed heavily at who awaited him on the other side. Oh, so you finally got sick of watching from the outside bench? Are you gonna sit by my bedside now? He asked sluggishly, a hint of irritation in his voice as he gave Hinata, who stood at his doorstep, a bored look. The Hyuga girl was carrying a stack of books and several pencils, and if the subtle scent of lavender surrounding her was any indication, she was freshly showered. What are you talking about? She asked, her tone defensive and face red. Naruto shook his head and gestured to the scholarly material stacked in her arms. Oh, save it. We both know what I'm talking about. Enough about that. What are you doing here, and why are you loaded with books? He asked. Hinata quickly recollected herself and stepped into his apartment without an invitation. The exams begin tomorrow, and while much of the testing is combat-based, one particular section is always a written test. I trust Nara-san's family to prepare him, but I don't trust you to study on your own. As such, I will be helping you study, she explained as she turned on the lights in the room and set the materials down on his dining table. The Jinchuriki rubbed his eyes and trudged back to the table. Good luck with that. There's a reason I hardly ever passed our written tests in the academy, he said as he sat down across from the Hyuga girl. Hinata shrugged and launched a pencil at him point first, forcing him to reflexively catch it before it could remove one of his eyes. For all of your frustrating traits, I don't think you're stupid. I think you probably could have passed those tests had you felt compelled to prepare, she said. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the near compliment. I made a decision early on that I wasn't going to put effort into anything that wouldn't matter in the long run. Studying wouldn't have done me any good. The stuff they teach academy isn't applicable anyway, he said. Hinata nodded in agreement. Very true. As a person who has been trained in taijutsu from a young age, I can confirm that the hand-to-hand combat they teach is utter rubbish. I never paid much attention to the lectures, as much of it was worthless information. My scores were always excellent, but never perfect for that reason, she said. Do you know what's going to be on this test? Naruto asked skeptically. The Hyuga heiress shook her head and spread the 4 books and 3 scrolls she had brought across the table. No, but with all of this material, we should be able to educate you on just about anything the test makers might throw your way. I have been steadily reading this throughout the last 3 weeks, so I have already absorbed most of the information. All you're going to need is a serviceable level of proficiency in each topic, she explained. Naruto scratched the back of his head as he began to fully comprehend the sheer amount of information contained within each collection of text. You really might be wasting your time. I don't remember things very well, and it's already late at night, he said. Hinata tilted her head to one side, the slightest hint of a smile on her face. Tell me, Naruto-san, how many hours of sleep would you like to enter tomorrow's testing with? She asked innocently. Naruto frowned. I don't know. 8 maybe, he replied, unsure of his teammate's intentions. The Hyuga girl nodded and unfurled one of the scrolls. In that case, shut up and start taking notes, because you aren't going to bed until I am satisfied with your memorization of this material, she said, tapping on the now open scroll as she spoke. The Jinchuriki snorted and twirled his pencil. What if I just get up and go to bed? Are you going to attack me in my own home? He asked semi-seriously. Hinata gave him a hard stare and began looking over the scrolls she had unfurled. If I must. The more likely scenario is that I would simply force my way into your bedroom and obnoxiously read the text out loud to you. I would make your ears bleed until you came to your senses and returned to this table. Don't test me, Naruto-san. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, as they say, she said. Naruto shuddered at the thought and put his pencil to the paper that had been given to him. The pair then began to study. It was a slow, arduous, and incredibly, unbearably boring process, but the blonde slowly absorbed the information as time went on. Why are you helping me, Hinata? This doesn't make much sense if we're comparing this to how you've been acting during the morning sessions, Naruto asked after roughly 15 minutes of studying. The Hyuga girl glanced up from her notes and remained silent for several moments. I have heard that if one member of a team fails the written test, the entire cell is disqualified. I cannot and will not allow that to happen. This is merely a precautionary measure to ensure the passing of Team 7, she said, her face and tone unreadable. Naruto nodded. That makes sense. It lines up with the bad attitude you've had lately. Thanks for being consistent for once, Hinata, he replied sarcastically. Hinata scowled at him. Just because I take my training seriously doesn't mean that I have a bad attitude. I simply do not wish to speak with either you or Nara-san any more than I have to, she explained irritatedly. The Jinchuriki maintained eye contact despite her glare. When did that change? You may not have been all that uplifting to talk to before, but you were willing to talk. Also, I don't appreciate you treating me like a liability, which is exactly what this feels like, he said. The Hyuga heiress' glare intensified at his words. Have you ever considered that perhaps you are won by some metrics? She snapped. The moment she had finished the sentence, her face paled and one of her hands slapped over her mouth. Naruto stared at her silently for several moments. I don't understand you. You say all of these hurtful things, and then you look like somebody just murdered a kitten right in front of you. What's with you? If your own words bother you so much, don't say them, he said. The Hyuga heiress pursed her lips and lowered her eyes to the table. After another 5 minutes of silent studying, Naruto spoke once more. And to answer your question, yes? Yes, I have, he said quietly. Hinata glanced up from the table briefly and took a deep breath. I apologize. I stepped out of line. Forgive me, Naruto-san, she said, clearly hating every word that was leaving her mouth. Naruto raised an eyebrow. An apology? Not something I thought I'd ever hear from you. Either way, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Just you actually saying you're sorry is enough. I don't get that out of people much, as you probably could have guessed, he said with a depressive chuckle. The rigidness in the Hyuga girl's posture lessened somewhat at his words. Gee, good. In that case, we should continue studying. There is still much to do, she said, still embarrassed by her previous outburst. The Jinchuriki grinned at her still somewhat frazzled demeanor. Man, for all of your smoothness as a talker, you get shaky pretty easily. Keep that up. It's really endearing, he said humorously. Hinata turned red and gave him a confused look. Do you know what the word endearing means, Naruto-san? She asked quietly. The blonde shook his head, much to her relief and subtle disappointment. Nope. I've just heard you use it to make fun of me before. I also heard your sister use it when she was talking to Kunoichi. Seemed like a good word, so I'm going to use it now, he said matter-of-factly. Hinata allowed a ghost of a smile to form on her face. Go right ahead, Naruto-kun. Use it as much as you would like. Shikamaru sighed as he and his teammates waited silently in a hall full of genin. They were in the building in which they would be taking the written section of the Chunin exams. They had been forced to navigate a genjutsu to reach the place they were currently standing. They had an enormous advantage due to Hinata's Byakugan, so the illusion had been simple to find a way around. We get here at 6 in the morning, solve the puzzle, and then we find out that the test doesn't start until 7:30. Typical, the shadow user thought to himself sulkily. He glanced around him at the other genin. The entirety of teams 8 and 10 were in attendance, as well as another team that contained Neji, a boy in a jumpsuit, and a girl who was filing her nails with a kunai. Beyond the genin of Konoha, there were teams from various other villages. From Suna to Kusa, the selection of nationalities was quite varied. I forget how big an event this is sometimes. Everybody but Kumo is here, Shikamaru thought to himself. He then looked to his teammates, who were leaning on opposite walls of the hallway. The lazy genin chuckled at one specific detail of the sight. You aren't slick, Hinata. Staring at the floor with your Byakugan active is kind of a dead giveaway as to what you're really looking at, he thought humorously. He then focused on Naruto for a moment, and he's totally oblivious. Lucky you, Hinata, he thought, stifling a laugh as he watched his aloof teammates silently, subtly stare at the Jinchuriki. Shikamaru glanced up at the clock on the wall and sighed. It was only 6:30, which meant that there was still an hour until the beginning of the written test. I might as well walk around a little. My knees are going to snap if I just stand in place, he thought to himself. The shadow user then said a brief set of goodbyes to his teammates, and began wandering the genin-infested halls. What an odd bunch of people. All shapes and sizes, he thought to himself as he observed his fellow genin. As he looked around, his focus shifted from hall in front of him to the people standing against the wall. It was this that caused him to run into a boy who was walking in the opposite direction. Second time this month that I've run into somebody, he thought to himself, as he regained his lost balance. He then looked to the boy he had run into. He was fairly short and had red hair. He also had a strange gourd strapped to his back. The most striking thing about him was the incredibly defined circles under his eyes, which made his unflinching stare even more unnerving. Sorry about that. I wasn't paying attention, Shikamaru said somewhat nervously. The redhead remained silent, unblinking as he attempted to stare a hole in the shadow user's skull. Oh, so that's how it is. Fine, I'll have a staring contest with you, prick the lazy genin thought to himself as he returned the blank glare. The boys stood in tense silence for several moments before they were interrupted by a girl with a fan. "Leave him be, Gaara. Don't waste your energy," she said, pulling him back as she spoke. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow and began to walk through opening the girl had created for him in the middle of the hall. Before he could pass the pair completely, the girl's hand shot out and seized his arm. "Do you have a death wish?" she asked quietly. The shadow user glanced at her out of the corner of his eye without turning his head. "Does he?" he asked. The girl stared at him for a moment before letting go of his arm and allowing him to pass. She kept her eyes on him as he walked down the hall. Shikamaru, once he was out of her earshot, sighed and shook his head. "This is why I don't wake up early. I get mouthy." Temari turned her attention back to Gaara for the first time in several minutes. The redhead was also staring in the direction the Konoha genin had walked. His facial expression was unreadable as it always was, save for the nearly imperceptible smile tugging at his mouth. "How long does he have?" she asked, well aware of what was likely circulating through the boy's demented mind. To her surprise, Gaara shook his head and chuckled. "That depends. I like him," he replied, shocking his sister further. Temari furrowed her eyebrows. "What? What makes him any different?" she asked skeptically. The redhead allowed a bit of sand to leak from his gourd and fall to the floor. "He has a spine. A rare trait these days. I'm going to very much enjoy ripping it from his body." "Oh, how satisfying that will be," he replied. Temari shuddered at his brutally casual words. Such topics were discussed a disturbing amount within their family, but she had never truly grown accustomed to it. "There's a lot of people here. More than I thought there would be," she commented as she glanced around at the crowd that populated the crowd. Gaara nodded. "By the time we reach the combat-oriented section of this exam, there will be less than 30 people. I guarantee it," he said. Temari chuckled. "Who do you think will still be there?" she asked curiously. The redhead thought for a moment before gesturing to Team 8 and Team 10, the team that the boy I just ran into hails from, and those two teams. "Unlike most of the ninja here, they actually have detectable chakra," he said. The fan-wielding Kunoichi studied the groups for a moment, and looked back down the hall. "You just picked a fight you can't win, whoever you are." Chapter 18, Hit List. Naruto stretched and sat himself down behind a desk as the rest of the genin entered the testing hall. It was 7:28, and the test was about to begin. As the children all took their seats, all of them taking chairs a fair distance from their teammates, as per the rules, Naruto was seated next to a ninja from Kusagakure while Hinata was seated next to a boy wearing a green jumpsuit. Shikamaru was seated on the other side of the room next to a girl from Suna who appeared to speaking to him sternly. After exactly 2 minutes of waiting, a large man entered the room packed with genin. The moment he had situated himself at the front of the room, every ninja in the room became silent. The man's presence was intimidating in and of itself, but his appearance was no help. He was tall, broad, and his face was scarred. "Good, most of you showed up. Now we can get started. My name is Ibiki Marino, and I will be your proctor for this phase of the exam. You will be given exactly 90 minutes to complete a comprehensive, 9-question test. Cheating of any kind will be punished with disqualification should you be caught. With all of that out of the way, we're going to get started right away." "We don't have all day," he said. Many of the children in the room audibly swallowed nervously. What did you guys expect? This was never going to be as simple as just looking at the person next to you's paper. That little speech was an invitation. "Let's see how many of you take it," Naruto thought to himself with a chuckle. Ibiki then passed out the test questions. As the papers circulated the room, the once confident faces of the genin fell. The proctor smirked to himself as he observed their reactions. It appeared that he had expected such a reaction from the new crop of ninja. "Now then, you all have your testing materials, so you may begin. The timer starts now," Ibiki announced to the room. Pencils then began to hit paper at a rapid pace. Interestingly, and somewhat predictably, the sound of pencil on paper became much fainter after roughly 30 seconds. Within the first minute of 90, the majority of the genin were already perplexed by the set of questions in front of them. Naruto looked over each individual question and sighed. "Yup. Just like I thought. I have no idea what any of this means. Guess I was right, Hinata," he thought to himself as he glanced to his teammates. What he saw put a smile on his face. The Hyuga heiress was wearing a knowing smirk as she steadily wrote down answer after answer. Her Byakugan were active and her eyes were glued to her own paper. "Clever girl. Looks like you found a reliable source. I'm almost proud of you," Naruto thought to himself. He then turned his attention back to his own paper. "I've got to find my own way around this. I don't have any special powers to cheat with, so I've got to be creative, he thought to himself. Just as the thought crossed his mind, a genin was called by Ibiki. Ryo Takahata, pack your things and leave. Take your team with you, the proctor called from the front of the room. The genin sitting next to Naruto shot up out of his seat, a look of shock and terror on his face. What? He exclaimed. Before he could continue to speak, Ibiki shot him a hard glare that left no room for further debate. The boy lowered his eyes to the floor and led 2 other angry genin out of the room. Over the next several minutes, 4 more teams were eliminated due to various forms of cheating. This is just brutal. Anybody without some weird ability is going to get caught right away. This sucks, Naruto thought in frustration. As he sulked, his body was seized by an invisible force. What the hell? The blonde thought frantically. His eyes darted around the room until he spotted Shikamaru, who gave him a subtle nod. As the shadow user nodded, Naruto did as well, allowing him to view the floor momentarily. Shikamaru had connected their shadows together. Thanks, Shikamaru, Naruto thought gratefully as his hand began to move across his paper. After 2 minutes, his test was completed. Naruto's body was then released from the jutsu, allowing him to better observe his answers. They all look reasonable. Probably not 100% correct, but better than I could have come up with, he thought to himself, relief washing over him. He then put his pencil down and waited. Unfortunately for the blonde, Shikamaru's tactics had not only solved his answer problem, but it had also left him with far more free time than was ideal. Only 20 minutes had passed, meaning that 70 still remained. Naruto sighed and scratched the side of his face as he looked around the room. Shikamaru is finished, and it looks like Hinata is too. Our team should pass this no problem. As for everybody else, he thought. He observed the rest of the room for a moment before chuckling to himself. They're drowning in their own stress. Great. Well, except for the redhead, the guy with the makeup, and the chick sitting next to Shikamaru, he thought to himself humorously. Slowly but surely, the 70 minutes passed, with only one more team being eliminated during the long stretch. Pencils down and mouths shut. Your written exam is nearly complete, Ibiki called as the buzzer on the timer went off. After silencing the obnoxious ringing sound, the proctor stood up from the chair he had been sitting in and looked around the room. As many of you may have likely noticed, 9 questions is an unusual number for such a major assessment. To the relief of many of you detail-oriented brats, there is, in fact, a 10th question. Would you like to hear it? He asked. A murmur rippled through the remaining genin. Choose your answers carefully. Should you answer this question incorrectly, you will not only be disqualified immediately without the rest of your tests being graded, but you will also be banned from the Chunin exams indefinitely. No retakes. Either you take the chance this year, or you cut your losses and study up for next year. Take your pick, Ibiki cut in through the muttering. There was a minute of silence following his words. Eventually, a boy stood up and walked out of the testing room, signifying his desire to cut his losses, as Ibiki had put it. Several other participants soon followed him. After another 3 minutes of tense silence, Ibiki nodded in approval and turned his attention back to the remaining ninja. Congratulations. You have all passed the first phase of the Chunin exam. You may celebrate if you wish, he said jovially. Naruto did a double take and raised his hand. Wait, you haven't even asked us the 10th question yet. How have we been passed? He asked skeptically. The other genin nodded in agreement and looked to the proctor for an explanation. Ibiki's grin widened. I did ask the question. The question was whether or not you wanted to take the chance of answering it. You gave me your answers loud and clear when you stayed in your seats. Being a Chunin is less about knowledge than mentality. You were all willing to risk your future to advance your immediate goals. An admirable trait, and exactly what we're looking for in a promotion-worthy genin, he explained. The group all nodded in understanding and took the proctor's previous suggestion, celebrating amongst themselves. Naruto stood up from his seat and made his way to Shikamaru. He slapped hands with the lazy genin and grinned. Thanks for the help back there. I'd have been fried without it, he said gratefully. Shikamaru snorted and shook his head. No need to thank me. You wouldn't have needed those answers in the long run from the looks of it, and most of what I gave you was bullshit I made up anyways, he said. The Jinchuriki raised an eyebrow. Did you know this would happen? He asked curiously. The shadow user shrugged and yawned as he finally stood up from his desk. I had a hunch. My hunches tend to be right, so I decided to take it to the bank. Worked out pretty well for us this time, he said tiredly. The boys were then joined by Hinata, who looked quite pleased. Excellent work, you two. I was wondering how you would cheat. I had an easy solution, of course, so I had myself covered. I hadn't thought of your shadow possession being potentially useful, Nara-san, she complimented. Naruto grinned. You figured out the point of this whole thing real quick. Nice job, Hinata, he replied. The Hyuga girl smiled happily at the compliment, and allowed her dojutsu to manifest. These do come in handy every once in a while. Multipurpose would be an understatement, she replied. Shikamaru immediately burst out laughing, earning a look of confusion from both Naruto and Hinata. Oh, don't mind me. Just remembering something I saw, he said. The genin continued to converse for several more minutes before a woman came crashing into the room. She had purple hair, and was generally quite wild-looking. As she climbed back to her feet after crashing into the opposite wall and falling over, Ibiki scratched the back of his head and sighed. You're late, Anko, he said tiredly. The woman, apparently named Anko, grinned and slapped him on the back. There's a lot of kids in here. You're getting soft, baldy, she goaded before turning to the group of genin. The proctor sighed once more. Save your insults for later. Just give your speech already, he said. Anko shrugged and began her speech. I'm not all that eloquent, but I'll get my point across to you little gremlins. You are to report to the Forest of Death at 7 o'clock sharp tomorrow morning. Not before, not after. Sharp. Just a warning, some of you are going to see your first dead body in less than 24 hours, she said before vanishing in a puff of smoke. That was unceremonious, Hinata said after several moments of silence. Naruto nodded in agreement. Well, at least she warned us before she really started talking, he said. The genin then began to drain out of the testing hall, eventually leaving only Team 7. We should probably get going, Naruto said. His teammates nodded and followed him out of the room. They had survived the first phase of the exam, but greater, more intimidating challenges awaited them. Shikamaru sighed tiredly as he stepped out of Ichiraku's stand. It was fairly late, and he was exhausted. His teammates were still eating their food, and they didn't appear to be close to done. Who knew Hinata had a comparable appetite to that slob? The more you know, I guess, he thought to himself as he leapt up onto the roof of a building to cut down on the time he would be forced to travel to reach his home. He then began to bound across the roofs one at a time. After several minutes, he stopped crossing buildings. Come on out. God, you suck at stalking, he called out. After a moment of silence, a figure stepped out from behind a freight box on the roof. Compared to who, exactly? Temari, who had been quietly trailing the shadow user, asked skeptically. Shikamaru gestured back towards Ichiraku's. One of my teammates. She has an odd habit of following our teammate around at night. It's honestly pretty creepy, he explained. The sand Kunoichi raised an eyebrow and stepped forward into the moonlight. You're an odd bunch. Blondie is strong as hell, the girl is apparently a stalker, and then there's you, a suicidal moron, she said. The shadow user snorted. Moron, huh? What's that make you then? You wouldn't have written anything down on the test if I hadn't helped you, he pointed out. Temari prickled slightly. I never asked for your help. I would have figured something out. I always do. Besides, your answers were stupid, she retorted. Shikamaru chuckled and gave her a smug grin. The answers didn't need to be any good. They didn't matter in the end. You just had to look like you were trying, which you didn't. Anybody with half a brain could have figured out what was really going on. Hell, Naruto figured it out, and he isn't the most cognitive person in the world, he said. The fan wielder furrowed her eyebrows. If you knew what was going to happen, why did you help me? You could have knocked my team out of the exams by leaving me to squirm and get desperate to cheat. What's in this for you? She asked skeptically. Shikamaru shrugged. I'm a nice guy. I just adore helping people, he said with a sarcastic grin. Temari shook her head and produced a kunai, which she began filing her nails with. Somehow I doubt that. Back on topic, you do realize just how badly you screwed up this morning, right? She asked. The lazy genin thought back to the period before the testing had begun. All I did was stare him down a little. What's the problem? Can he not handle confrontation? He asked. Temari sighed and put away her kunai. Not traditionally, no. He tends to break things he doesn't like. People included. You just put yourself on his hit list, and you have no way to stop him if he decides to mash you up, she said. Shikamaru yawned. An angster, huh? Guess his hormones are out of control. I'm honestly more curious about why you're telling me all of this than your brother's temper tantrums, he said. The sand Kunoichi mentally applauded the shadow user's sharp tongue, but kept her mouth shut while she gathered her thoughts. I'm telling you because I'd rather see you survive. Don't get the wrong idea, I could care less about whether you live or die during this exam, but when Gaara wants somebody dead, he ignores situational rules. If he kills you outside of the combat phase, I get in trouble by extension, she explained. The lazy genin nodded and hopped across an alley to the next building over. Thanks for the heads up. I'll keep that in mind on my walks home. Knight, whoever you are, he called as he bounded away. Temari sighed and shook her head as his form grew smaller and smaller in the distance. Poor schmuck has no idea what's coming. Chapter 19, An Accursed Marking. Naruto yawned as he walked into the training field that contained the entrance to the so-called Forest of Death. It was exactly 7 o'clock, and he had stayed up fairly late the previous night. Despite his exhaustion, he had managed to arrive exactly one time alongside his teammates. It appeared that every team had arrived at the contracted time, as the entrance to the field was absolutely flooded with the remaining genin, 31 in total. So, this is the Forest of Death. It looks quite ordinary to me, Hinata, who stood at Naruto's left, said. The blonde shook his head and glanced at his teammate. I don't think the forest itself is dangerous on its own. It's named for what happens when you throw a whole bunch of bloodthirsty genin inside. I did some research last night, and this phase of the exam is screwed up, he said. The Hyuga girl raised an eyebrow at his reply. What did you find out? I never took you as one to research, she asked skeptically. The Jinchuriki shook his head again and gestured towards Anko, who stood at the gated entrance to the forest. She'll fill you in. It's about what you'd expect from a phase that takes place in the Forest of Death. This is a little off topic, but how did you sleep? He asked. Hinata responded by rubbing a bit of sleep from her eyes. Not well, if I am to be honest. My sleep was repeatedly interrupted by nightmares. Mostly of the coming days and what they may bring, she admitted. Naruto smiled at her uncharacteristic openness. The chances of all of us dying are pretty low. We'll all be fine, probably, he said. The Hyuga heiress sighed and gave him a tired look. Probably HM? How comforting, she said sarcastically. The Jinchuriki laughed out loud at her exhausted response, earning himself an elbow to the ribs from his teammate. Look alive, you two. I think she wants your attention, Shikamaru, who had been standing silently several feet away, said while gesturing to Anko. The pair turned their attention to the proctor, who was assessing the large group of children patiently. Well, it looks like you all followed my instructions. Good, you all have some sense. Now then, let me explain the wonderful activity you're all about to take part in, she began, quickly gaining the attention of any uninterested observers. You will all be entering this forest. We Konoha folk call it the Forest of Death. Your goal is to collect scrolls. 2 to be exact. 1 heaven scroll and 1 earth scroll will be required. Each of you will begin this phase with one or the other, meaning that you'll have to acquire your second scroll from one of your peers, she continued, presenting 2 different scrolls to the group. A muttering soon passed through the crowd, eliciting a smirk from Anko. And before one of you sadistic little psych patients asks, murder is permitted. Not recommended, but permitted. Now come on up and get a scroll, the proctor concluded. The genin then all flocked to Anko, with each team acquiring a scroll from her. After several minutes of organizing and acquisition, the crowd reassembled itself just outside of the gates. In the center of the forest, you'll find a tower. That's where you're trying to get to. Once again, you'll need both scrolls to get in, so don't even think about just waltzing in, Anko said. She then unlocked the gate and gestured towards the dark trees within. Get going, brats. Hope you packed a lunch, she said with a dark grin. The genin then set out into the forest, splitting off in a variety of different directions nearly immediately. Hinata, using her Byakugan, led Team 7 northeast down what she perceived to be the least dangerous pathway. We're going to head this way for roughly 2 miles before we turn northwest. I have a hunch that we'll run into at least one party along the way that we can take an earth scroll from, the Hyuga girl said as they ran across the forest floor. And if we don't run into somebody? Naruto asked. Hinata looked back over her shoulder and gave him a rare smile. In that case, we'll go hunting. We've all been training ourselves ragged in preparation for this. Think of it as a chance to show what you've learned. Hopefully, we'll be able to save our strength for the combat phase, though, she replied. Naruto returned the smile and looked to Shikamaru, who was staring straight ahead with a look of concern on his face. Something wrong? The blonde asked, snapping the lazy genin out of his trance. Shikamaru glanced at him and shook his head before returning his gaze to the path ahead. No, everything's fine. Just taking it all in, you know? He said. Hinata nodded and sighed sympathetically. I understand the feeling. What bothers me more than anything is the fact that murder is permitted. The fact that I may not only lose one of my teammates, but potentially my right to say I have never killed is distressing to me, she said. Naruto chuckled. Ah, look at that, Shikamaru. She does care, he joked, earning a glare from the Hyuga heiress. Must you make a joke out of everything, Naruto-san? She asked. The Jinchuriki sighed and gave her a tired shrug. I'm just trying to lighten things up a little. I'm stressed, too. We all are. Let's try not to think about what could happen, and think about what we're doing right now, he said. Hinata nodded and returned her attention to the path they were slowly carving into the forest. Despite their apprehension, nothing could have prepared them for the horrors they would experience in the god-forsaken forest. Gaara chuckled to himself as he watched Team 8 be terrorized by a strange, snake-like man. The group of genin had encountered the man roughly 10 minutes previously, and they had nothing to offer him. Whoever he is, that man is not a genin. No, he's something far greater. I dare say he possesses more power than my own sensei, the redhead thought to himself as Shino was knocked unconscious after being launched into the base of a tree. Sasuke had been bitten by the strange man several minutes previously, and had lost consciousness as a result. The only member of Team 8 that was still conscious was Sakura, who was an incredibly weak combatant. Good riddance. Such weakness is appalling, Gaara thought to himself as the pink-haired girl was cornered. However, much to the redhead's surprise, the man did not end her life. Instead, he burst out laughing and vanished into a puff of smoke. How anticlimactic. Disappointing, Gaara thought to himself. As he watched Sakura tremble, a thought struck him. Temari and Kankuro have already gathered the scrolls, but I think she deserves a punishment for her uselessness, he thought as he jumped down from his perch high up in the trees. He landed squarely in front of the girl, eliciting a terrified squeak from her. Lovely scenery in these parts, don't you think? He said in a mockingly jovial tone as he knelt down in front of her. Sakura began to shake in his presence. What do you want? She stuttered, clearly overwhelmed by fear and exhaustion. Gaara chuckled and slid an index finger under her chin, lifting her head and forcing her to meet his eyes. Where is your cell's scroll? I know it's here somewhere, he asked, his tone low and menacing. The pink-haired genin tried to scoot backwards, but was seized by the ankle by a tendril of sand. Don't try to run. I have no qualms about killing you, but I may just let you live if you tell me what I want to know. Does that sound reasonable to you? Gaara asked. Sakura struggled to control her breathing for several moments, but eventually regained enough composure to speak. Shino has the scroll. It's the Earth Scroll. Is that what you need? She asked nervously. The redhead smirked and stood up to claim his unneeded prize. Oh, the type of scroll doesn't matter, he said as he removed the scroll from Shino's unconscious body. He then turned back to Sakura, only to be greeted by a kunai flying towards his face. A wall of sand immediately came to his aid, effortlessly stopping the airborne blade in its tracks. The redhead shook his head and chuckled to himself. How foolish can you be? I meant it when I said I would let you live. Well, I suppose you know what comes next, he said as he slowly walked Sakura down. Before he could reach her, a stirring sound caught his attention. Sasuke-kun? Sakura said quietly. Gaara glanced over his shoulder and raised an eyebrow. Standing roughly 20 feet away was Sasuke, who had risen up from the ground. His body was enveloped in a dark aura and strange markings were covering his skin. Fascinating, the redhead thought to himself as he turned to face the Uchiha fully. Sasuke's eyes were downcast and his posture was strange, but his presence was undeniably threatening. Sakura, take Shino and run away. Do it now, he said sternly. His teammate opened her mouth to protest, but shut it again when Sasuke turned his gaze up from the ground and glared at her. She quickly made her way to Shino and picked him up before laboring her way into the thick forestry. Gaara watched her leave for a moment before returning his attention to the Uchiha. You seem quite lively for somebody who has just awakened. Well, lively may not be the right word, he said. Sasuke did not respond. Instead, he took a step forward and drew a kunai. The redhead grinned sadistically and allowed his gourd to open fully and leak sand. I suppose I can spare a few minutes. Hinata froze in her tracks as something entered her extended field of vision. Her sudden halt prompted her teammates to do the same, much to their confusion and mild irritation. What's wrong, Hinata? Naruto asked as the Hyuga girl scanned the area around them carefully. She glanced over her shoulder at him and pursed her lips. Somebody is trailing us. I don't recognize them, and their chakra is absolutely overwhelming, she said somewhat nervously. Shikamaru then jogged his way to the front of their formation. That's one of two people. Either it's the redhead with the gourd, or it's somebody I don't have a name for, he said, earning a look of confusion from both of his teammates. What do you mean, Nara-san? You sound as though you were expecting this, Hinata asked skeptically. The lazy genin sighed and glanced around. The guy with the gourd is named Gaara, and I think I might have pissed him off by accident. He's way too much for any of us. The other guy. Well, I've been feeling something since we entered the forest. Just a sinking feeling that somebody is here that shouldn't be, he explained. Naruto nodded. Same with me. The fox has been a bit more talkative since we got here, and he mentioned something like that, he said. Hinata focused her vision further and strained to view the specific details of the figure following them. I can confirm that this man has no gourd, meaning that this is the person the two of you have been sensing. In which case, we should get moving. He'll be right on top of us in less than 2 minutes, she said. Less than 2 minutes? Well, you aren't quite wrong, but not quite right either. Team 7 collectively tensed and all slowly glanced over their shoulders. Standing behind them, wearing a sickening, humorous grin was tall, long-haired man with pale white skin. He appeared to have fangs and was wearing a strange purple sash. While Naruto and Shikamaru did not recognize the strange man, Hinata, much to her own mental detriment, did. Orochimaru. The snake Sannin. What on earth is he? She began before lapsing into silence. Despite not recognizing the man, Shikamaru recognized the name. This isn't good. At all, he said tensely. Naruto began to sweat nervously at both the immense pressure being exuded by the man before them and the statements being made about him by his teammates. It appears my reputation precedes me. How flattering, Orochimaru said with a chuckle. He then took a step forward, prompting the genin to take a step in the opposite direction. To be honest, I thought it would take more than a shadow clone and chakra suppression to elude your Byakugan. The more you know, I suppose, he said as he slowly walked towards the children. What is it you want from us? Naruto demanded, doing his best to hide his quickly growing fear of the Sannin. Orochimaru's gaze momentarily shifted towards Hinata. I've already done what I came here to do, but a backup plan is never a bad idea, he said vaguely. Despite the lack of clarity in his statement, the Jinchuriki instantly understood who the Sannin was targeting. He drew a kunai and jumped in front of his teammate, barely intercepting Orochimaru's charge for the hyuga girl. Unfortunately, the action resulted in Naruto being struck between the eyes with a stiff punch, buckling his knees and forcing him to rebalance himself. Protective, are we? How cute, the Sannin mocked as he towered over Naruto and Hinata. Before he could advance any further, Shikamaru's shadow merged with his and froze him in place. Orochimaru simply laughed at the jutsu being cast upon him. You are aware of the limitations of that jutsu, are you not? He asked before effortlessly breaking free from the lazy genin's control. He then vanished from sight, reappearing in front of Shikamaru and slamming a knee into his solar plexus that knocked the wind out of the boy. Shikamaru! Naruto yelled. Instead of continuing to strike the fallen Nara, Orochimaru returned his attention to the hyuga and Jinchuriki. He vanished once more, this time becoming visible again with his fist cracking across Naruto's jawline, dropping him to his rear end and concussing him. With Naruto incapacitated, Hinata was now defenseless, as she stood no better a chance against the Sannin than the blonde had. Just relax and close your eyes. This won't take long, Orochimaru said smoothly as he slowly made his way towards the retreating hyuga, who eventually stopped moving backwards and assumed a taijutsu stance. Still ready to fight, HM? Your courage is admirable, but you're wasting your energy. This isn't a fight you can win, the Sannin said before blitzing forward and seizing her by her arms. He then sank his fangs into the side of her neck, eliciting a cry of pain from the hyuga heiress. After a moment of painful screaming, Hinata went limp, prompting the Sannin to drop her. There. That wasn't so bad now, was it? He asked sarcastically. As he turned his attention back to Naruto, a bluish hue caught his eye. Is that what I think it is? Orochimaru wondered to himself as Naruto charged towards him with a spiraling ball of blue chakra in the palm of his hand. Rasengan! The blonde yelled as he thrust the orb of chakra towards the Sannin, his eyes glowing blood red and his pupils slitted. Before the jutsu could make contact with him, Orochimaru seized the Jinchuriki by the wrist and flung him into a nearby tree, which was obliterated by the spiraling ball of energy. Quite an advanced jutsu for a genin. It's still unstable and I would assume it's quite taxing, but the fact that you can use the Rasengan at all is impressive, the Sannin complimented. Naruto forced himself to his feet and lifted the fallen tree off of himself. Get away from her, he growled as he assumed a feral taijutsu stance. Orochimaru chuckled and stepped away from Hinata's unconscious body. I was already planning on it, he said. The moment the sentence left his mouth, the Sannin vanished in a puff of smoke, leaving a battle-ready and enraged Naruto alone with his knocked-out teammates. After taking several moments to comprehend what had just happened, the Jinchuriki threw back his head and released a frustrated yell. Damn it! He bellowed. He then slammed his fist into another nearby tree, putting a hole in its trunk with the impact of his fist. Should I come back later? Naruto whipped around to face the voice that had spoken. Standing at the edge of the clearing where he and his teammates had fought against the Sannin was Gaara, who looked quite amused. What the hell do you want? The Jinchuriki demanded. Gaara chuckled and stepped forward into the clearing, a thin veil of sand circling his body as he walked. Calm yourself. You don't want to be on my bad side. Unless you'd like to end up like Sasuke Uchiha, he said in a calm, confident tone. Naruto's eyes widened. What did you do to Sasuke? He snapped. The redhead waved a hand in a dismissive fashion. He's still alive, don't worry yourself. All I did was break half of the bones in his body, he said, clearly proud of his apparent bludgeoning of the Uchiha. The blonde growled and took a step forward. What about the rest of his team? Are they alive? He asked. Gaara nodded and cracked his neck. Yes, they ran away at Sasuke's command. Cowards, the lot of them. People like you and I have no reason to concern ourselves with such people, he said. Naruto raised an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? He asked. The redhead smirked and gestured towards the other members of Team 7, who were still incapacitated. Look around you. They had nothing for that man. Neither did you, and neither would I had I chosen to engage him at any point, but you were at least capable of piquing his interest. Beyond our greater capabilities, we have something else in common, he said. Naruto narrowed his eyes. That being? He asked skeptically. Gaara chuckled darkly and closed his eyes momentarily. When he reopened them, they were gold in color. We both harbor a demon. Something far more powerful than ourselves. A final trump card. Those red eyes of yours and the aura you exude are a dead giveaway, he said. The blonde Jinchuriki tensed slightly, but stood his ground. You're a Jinchuriki too. Am I supposed to care? If you want to fight, I'm more than willing, he said as he assumed a taijutsu stance. Gaara chuckled and shook his head before producing a scroll. No, not here. We have no audience here to appreciate my painstaking efforts in tracking you down. I originally set out for your team in order to kill your male teammate, but after seeing you in action, my focus has shifted, he said. He then tossed the scroll he had produced to Naruto, who caught it easily. It was an earth scroll. Why are you giving me this? He demanded. His fellow Jinchuriki responded by turning around and beginning to walk away into the brush. To ensure your participation in the combat phase of this exam, he replied before vanishing. Naruto released the breath he had been holding and examined the scroll. It was authentic, and did not appear to be trapped. That solves the scroll problem, I guess, he thought to himself as he made his way to Shikamaru, who was still unconscious. That Orochimaru guy knocked you out cold with one shot to the ribs. That's scary, he thought nervously as he moved his teammate into a more comfortable position. He then jogged over to Hinata. While checking he for injuries, he spotted something unusual. There was a small, oddly shaped tattoo on her neck. Chapter 20, Needling Simplicity. Kakashi frowned to himself as he watched his students from afar. They were all within the tower that stood in the center of the Forest of Death, meaning that they had survived the second phase. They had made fairly good time considering what had occurred in the forest. In fact, they had been the second of 5 teams to arrive. The majority of the teams that had survived the first phase of the exams had also survived the second phase. Even if they made it here physically alright, Naruto isn't in a great place, and Hinata is more than a little confused as to why she was marked. It just doesn't add up. Sasuke I can understand, but Hinata? What is he angling for? The Jonin wondered to himself. He then removed his forehead protector from his Sharingan and focused it on Hinata's neck, where the mark had been left by Orochimaru. The chakra contained in that seal is nasty. It's nowhere near as bad as Sasuke's, but still not good, he thought to himself. As he considered the various trials and tribulations his team had encountered in the forest, he was joined by Anko. You're worried about the girl, aren't you? She asked. Kakashi nodded and sighed heavily as he covered his Sharingan once more. I know that there isn't much I could have done to prevent this. Orochimaru would have hung me out to dry even if I had somehow been there to help, but I still feel terrible. On top of that, Naruto's been beside himself since then, he said. Anko frowned. What do you plan to do about the curse mark? Think carefully, she asked. The silver-haired ninja thought for a moment before replying. I should probably seal it myself. Both she and Sasuke, for that matter, he responded. To his surprise, Anko shook her head. If you want her to get her ass handed to her in the prelims, go right ahead. The sealing procedure will take a lot out of her. If Sasuke were healthy, I would agree with him being sealed, because he's strong enough from the get-go to handle one of the weaker genin in a compromised state. Hinata is stronger than a few of the people here without access to her Byakugan, but not Naruto, she said. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. You know about that, huh? He said, earning a chuckle from the exam proctor. She sighed and looked out over to Team 7, which seemed to be in the middle of a discussion. Why do you want them fighting each other, Kakashi? Be honest, she asked. Kakashi chewed the inside of his lip absently as he gathered his words. I won't go into detail, but a quiet, detrimental conflict has been raging between them for a few weeks now. Especially on Hinata's end. Honestly, I'm not all that sure Naruto is aware of what goes on behind that mask she wears. He's seen what lies beyond it a few times, but those occasions have done more to confuse him than anything else, he said. Anko frowned. And how would having them fight in front of an audience solve anything? She asked skeptically. Kakashi shifted in place. They have differences to sort out, and an ego needs to be tamed. The only way to solve this problem once and for all is for them to blow off some steam. Sparring hasn't worked, and neither has competitive running. This wasn't my first choice, but I feel that it's necessary, he said. Anko remained silent for several seconds before speaking again. As a person who's been under the influence of the curse mark, I can tell you that this may actually make things worse. You aren't yourself, or, to be more exact, you're too much yourself. Everything you bury, everything you hide from those around you, it all comes flooding to the surface. Beyond the natural energy, that's what fuels the seal. Raw, brutal emotion, she said. The silver-haired ninja gave her a tired look. You know, it was your suggestion that I not suppress the seal, he pointed out. The proctor shrugged and began to fidget with the kunai. You either let her fight and watch her use Naruto as a psychological punching bag, or you deal with the Hyuga elders for weakening her. They will find out, and they won't see the logic. They're too damn proud for that, she said. Kakashi snorted. I can deal with those senile fools. They're about as threatening as a crippled house cat, he said bluntly. Anko launched the kunai she had been playing with into the ceiling. You may be able to, but Hinata can't. Those old coots will find a way to punish her for being weak enough to let herself be marked in the first place, she said. Her father is a reasonable man. I doubt that would happen, Kakashi countered. Anko shrugged again and produced another kunai. Maybe, maybe not. The elders can override his wishes if they're in a bad mood. Is that a coin you want to flip? She asked. The Jonin considered her argument for a moment before turning to leave. No, it isn't. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go deal with Sasuke's mark, he said before vanishing in a puff of smoke. After a moment or two of silence, Anko looked back to Team 7 and frowned. At least one of you is going to become a Chunin. Not sure who, but I do know one thing for sure. It's going to be ugly. Naruto yawned as he dragged himself into the gathering area of the tower. The surviving teams had been given 8 hours to sleep, and all those with any sense at all had taken the opportunity. The blonde had managed to sleep for 6 of the 8 hours after taking 2 to fall asleep. Hinata had done much the same, but sleep had been instant for the Hyuga heiress. The only person on Team 7 that did not sleep was Shikamaru, who insisted on keeping watch while they slept despite the safety of their location. You might want to wake up a bit, Naruto-san. The combat phase is about to begin, Hinata, who was walking alongside him, said. Despite her words, her tone held just as much exhaustion as the blonde's would had he been speaking. What do you mean? Don't we have a few weeks before we have to fight? Naruto asked skeptically. The Hyuga heiress shook her head and gestured to the small crowd of genin in the room. From what I've heard, when there are 5 or more teams, a preliminary round of combat is carried out. There are 6 teams in this room. We have to fight, and soon at that, she explained, eliciting a groan from both Naruto and Shikamaru. And here I thought I'd have time to prepare, the blonde grumbled as he turned his attention to the front of the crowd, where Hate, one of the exam proctors, was waiting patiently. After several moments, the room fell silent, allowing for Hate to speak. Congratulations on surviving the forest, everybody. Really, you should be proud of yourselves. Don't start celebrating yet, though. You still have 1, or rather, 2 phases left. Due to the fairly large number of you in here, we're going to be hosting several preliminary rounds before the actual combat phase begins. The losers of these prelim matches will be ejected from the exam, and they will be forced to come back next year, he began. A murmur rippled through the group of genin at his words. We don't have much time to waste. Now, as you can see, there are balconies on either side of this room. All of you please make your way to them, Hate ordered. The genin all nodded and ascended the stairs leading up into the viewing platforms. Naruto, Hinata, and Shikamaru arrived on the balcony last, due to Shikamaru tripping twice on his way up. Hate then positioned himself in the middle of the large room, aligned with the large statue near the wall. I didn't think Hokage-sama would attend the preliminary round of the exams. I suppose it could serve as added motivation, Hinata commented. Sarutobi was, as she had said, standing near Hate. He said several words to the proctor before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Naruto chuckled and gave his teammate a humorous look. Guess not, he teased. Hinata sighed and directed her attention back to Hate, who was once again awaiting the silence of the genin. Direct your attention to the screen up above. It will tell you who's fighting who, so pay attention. All of the matchups are random, he said, pausing strangely before the final word. The genin all nodded and looked to the screen with bated breath as a roulette of names scrolled by at blinding speeds. After several moments, the 2 slots in which names would be placed were occupied. The first match will be between Shikamaru Nara of Konohagakure and Kin Tsuchi of Otogakure. Would both participants please make their way down to the floor, please? Hate announced. And of course, I'm up first, fighting a girl. Fucking wonderful, the lazy genin muttered under his breath, earning a hard look from Hinata. Watch your language, she scolded as he made his way down the stairway. He was soon followed by the genin from Otogakure. After both combatants had arrived on the floor level, Hate had them stand across from one another on opposite sides of the enormous room. How long do you think this lasts? Naruto asked. Before Hinata could respond, a puff of smoke appeared behind them. Less than 5 minutes. Count on it, Kakashi, who had just arrived, said confidently. The blonde glanced over his shoulder. Took you long enough. I'll say that it takes him 10 minutes, he said. The Hyuga girl furrowed her eyebrows and glanced down at the lower level, where Shikamaru and Kin were receiving their instructions. How can the 2 of you be so sure? We know very little about this girl, she said. Kakashi snorted and made his way to the railing, which he began to lean on. Shikamaru is almost impossible to beat if you can't just overpower him. He's the smartest person in this room. He'll run mental circles around her once he gets going. Though, that might take a while, he said. Naruto nodded in agreement. Hinata decided to quit arguing and opted to focus her energy on the upcoming match. Now, since you're both ready, you may begin. Hate called out loudly. Shikamaru, as expected, took no immediate action. Instead, he simply began to walk forward at his foe, who had drawn a handful of saban needles. If you're going to use those, make it quick. This fight's gonna be slow as hell if we both try to make reads and all that junk, Shikamaru said tiredly, earning a hard glare from Kin. Well, since you asked so nicely, she said. The Oto genin then unleashed a barrage of saban, several of which had bells attached to them. Shikamaru deflected the majority of the needles with a kunai and dodged those that he could not knock aside. That all? He asked. Kin growled and stepped back, prompting the shadow user to charge forward and snap her head back with a hard punch between her eyes. Before he could build on his success, a ringing sound echoed through the room, causing him to freeze. Does that answer your question? Kin asked as Shikamaru struggled to move. The Oto girl then produced another bell and flicked it, producing another ringing sound that caused the lazy genin to see triple. What is this? Shikamaru growled as he struggled to regain his balance and move. The Oto girl grinned and launched a storm of saban into his paralyzed body, eliciting a cry of pain from the Nara. Auditory genjutsu. A favorite of mine, actually. I hope you like it too, she goaded as Shikamaru forced himself to his feet and took a shaky step forward. In response to his movement, Kin stepped back. She keeps backing up whenever I move forward. She probably needs to be a certain distance away from me for the sound to ring the right way. In other words, I need to pressure. No matter what he thought to himself, ignoring the searing pain in his limbs from the multiple puncture wounds, the Nara leapt forward and swung his kunai at one of the 3 Kins in front of him. The blade passed right through the image, meaning that he had aimed for one of the genjutsu-induced after images. God, I probably look so stupid right now. Just swinging at air, her thought to himself as he continued to miss with strikes, usually being paid back with a new puncture wound each time he missed. This sucks. Well, this probably won't last more than 5 minutes. I guess we were right, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said with a grimace as his teammate waded through wave after wave of needles. Hinata pulled out her pocket watch and looked at it. 3 minutes and 17 seconds have passed since the beginning of this match. Should he last another 2 minutes, he'll have proven you both wrong, she said. Kakashi shook his head and smiled at the crude, but potentially effective tactic Shikamaru was employing against Kin. Give it a minute. He's slowly but surely working his way towards winning this fight all at once, he assured, earning looks of confusion from his students. If this strategy of his involves getting stabbed with more saban than I did when I died, then he's doing a great job, Naruto said sarcastically. Hinata nodded in agreement. I agree with Naruto-san. This is going nowhere quickly, she said. The Jonin smirked and looked back at the genin. Tell me, what's different about their positioning now as opposed to how it was before? He asked. Hinata scanned the battlefield for a moment before shrugging. His kin is nearly backed into the wall, and Nara-san as she began, stopping before she finished the sentence as she came to an obvious realization. Oh. How crude and simple, she said. Naruto frowned, but soon came to the same conclusion his teammate had. He's trying to corner her for his shadow possession. It's a good idea, but he's getting carved up along the way, he said. The group continued to watch Shikamaru meander his way forward through the maelstrom of needles for several more minutes. As the minutes dragged on, Shikamaru began to dodge and deflect the needles again, implying that the genjutsu had worn. He's fully functional again. This fight is just about done, Kakashi said confidently as the Nara increased his forward pressure and made a hand sign. His shadow shot out and merged with Kin's. Hell yeah! He got her! Naruto yelled. Hinata nodded in approval and patiently awaited her sensei's predicted finish to the match. Shikamaru, taking advantage of the fact that he now had control of his opponent's body, took 2 steps back, forcing Kin's back to the concrete wall. The Nara then leaned forward and abruptly whipped his head back, smashing the back of the Odo Genin's skull into the concrete as a result. Kin slumped to the floor, having been knocked unconscious by the impact. Hate, who had been observing the match from roughly 50 feet away, jogged over and checked the girl's body before waving his hands over her. Kintsuchi is unable to continue. Therefore, the winner is Shikamaru Nara, he announced to the group in the balcony. Naruto and, quite surprisingly, Hinata both cheered for their teammate as he hobbled his way up the stairs while Kin was attended to by a team of medical ninja. Not pretty, but that was cool as hell, Naruto complimented as he slapped hands with his teammate. Shikamaru nodded and began to pluck Saban out of his arms and legs. Yeah, that was not worth the trouble. I'm going to be sore for the next month, he grumbled. After several minutes in which Kin's limp body was carried from the battlefield and Shikamaru removed the majority of the Saban from his body, Hate cleared his throat. Take a look up at the screen again, he said, prompting the genin to all look up at the monitor again. After the predictable roulette of names, 2 names slotted themselves in. The next match will be between Gaara of Sunagakure and Rock Lee of Konohagakure. Both combatants, come on down.